friends. I just pressed the Let's Go Live button. We all know what that means. After a long weekend, it wasn't very long. It was a nice short weekend, nice normal weekend. We got to make sure the tubes work before we jump into it on the lovely day. And it looks like they are alive and well, which is tremendous news because we've got some serious business to attend to today. So without any further ado, let's do it, shall we? Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live, the show that spotlights misconduct involving police, prosecutors, and politicians. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney, and today we're talking about some of those Trump cases that are out there, and we've got several of them to attend to. You can see three different segments that we're going to hit on the show today. First one is going to be about Judge Chutkan, and this is the January 6th case involving the insurrection, so-called, and we learned that this happened last week, and we're going to break this down, but Chutkan is reversing her own gag order. Remember, we read through the whole thing. Trump submitted a response to Jack Smith, the special counsel's request, to get rid of Trump's free speech because it might be dangerous in some way, shape, or form, in some location, in some permutation of reality that they live in. And so Trump responded to it. We've read through all of those. But then Chutkan came out, issued the gag order. Of course, we read through that. We will refresh our memory on this one just to see what the gag order had that in the original filing, the one that she ordered. We'll take a look at it. As soon as Chutkan reversed herself, as soon as she put it on a stay because Trump is appealing this, Trump went wild, man. And so he started posting on Truth Social, calling deranged Jack Smith deranged, which he was not allowed to do previously. And so we'll see what some of his comments look like out there on the forums. And he's also talking about another gag order. So we've kind of got two gag orders that we'll attend to here. He also is responding to the New York gag order because last week we learned that there, the judge fined him $5,000 for getting to remove a post that he was ordered to remove. And Trump, of course, ultimately removed that, but he still got fined $5,000. And we've been following this bouncing ball. We've been just checking what comes first, second, third. It's always a warning, then it'll be a civil fine, and then something else will happen. And what are they going to do? They're going to incarcerate him? Well, we'll see. So we'll go through all of that. Then I want to really dive into Trump's arguments. So, right, this is what he's saying on appeal. And this is not the appeal, but this is what he submitted to Judge Chutkan that caused her to reverse herself. And so we'll go through that and see what is inside. Not a super long filing, but some good stuff in there. He's talking about history and about how unprecedented all of this is, which we'll get into. Couple clips, one about the New York gag order and another one from a senator called Warnock, who is using the same line called "No one's above the law." So we'll check in with them, see what some people on the left are saying about all of this, because I think their takes are quite bad, actually. So we'll go through that. Then we spent a lot of time also talking about Trump and his presidential immunity. This is a big issue. You know, they keep saying that no one's above the law. No one's above the law. Well, that's not exactly true, right? The president is in this very unique situation because he is the executor of the law, right? He's like in this very, very unique root position, super user position. He kind of can do certain things that other people can't, like, for example, pardon people, right? You always forget about. What do you mean, Rob? How is he above the law? Well, somebody can literally break the law and he can literally pardon them. Okay. He's like literally above the law. He has that power to do that. So it's this it's this very interesting thing that can the president even be charged in a whole slew of different ways? And we'll see what Jack Smith says in response. We've already gone through Trump's filing, which was very good, very juicy. And if you missed that, I'd encourage you to search back through our channel to find that. But it's about Trump filed for presidential immunity. And so this is the response from Jack Smith, who's going to be saying all the reasons why Donald Trump is wrong, which we will unpack. And then lastly, in our final segment, we're going to talk about Andrew Weissmann. You remember this guy? Well, last week we saw two different plea deals, one from Sidney Powell and one from Kenneth Chesebro. And we went through both of those full proceedings. Man, I had a lot of fun with you guys last week doing that. It was very interesting to see how other courts do it, but then to see how we got to see the truth of what happened, and everybody else in the mainstream media, and even elsewhere, maybe in the not mainstream media, but largely on the left, they were all saying what a disaster this was. I even saw people on the right saying what a disaster this was. Sidney Powell's turning on Trump, and Kenneth Chesebro is turning on Trump, and Big Fani's winning, and blah, 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 blah. I don't think so. And that was our explanation last week. I thought both of these were smoking plea deals for Sidney Powell and for Chesebro. And Big Fani didn't really get much of anything from both of them. And guess what? Guess who agrees with us on that? Andrew Weissmann. I'm not sure he'd, agree with all the things that I just said there, but he did post a couple of interesting tweets about this, and we'll go through them because he's kind of telling everybody to calm down over there on the left. If you're doing cartwheels and backflips because you're like, everybody's turning on Trump, you might want to think again because it may not be that way. We also got a couple clips from MSNBC. This guy's even admitting it. It's like, it might be kind of hard for Big Fani. And then Trump is responding to some of this. In particular, to Sidney Powell and to her plea deal. And so we'll see what Trump had to say about all of this. But it is great to be with you, my friends. It is a beautiful Monday. And as you can see, we do have a lot of business to attend to. If you were not a member, then you missed a couple of our extra streams this weekend. This morning, we had a great stream. We were talking about what's going on in the Middle East and how the left is really fracturing. I mean, it's really kind of incredible what we're watching happen. We went through two articles this morning. One saying that the Palestinians are leaving the Biden administration, and the other saying that the Jews are leaving the Biden administration. It's just like this total catastrophe. AOC was there as a mess. So we'll see what, for the Biden administration, we'll see what they do about it. We also saw that China is moving warships and they're investigating Apple. So we talked about both those stories this morning. You may have missed that. If you want to join us on our morning streams or our Saturday streams, where on this weekend we talked about Byron Donalds making his announcement and how fun that was. And then we also talked about the Supreme Court, which is now allowing the Biden administration to censor America until the court comes out with an order, which will probably not be until like June of next year, which will mean we'll have a ton of primaries where the Biden government can literally do the same thing that they were doing in 2020. And so, man, we talked about that on Saturday at our members only streams. And if you want to be a part of those member only streams, we'd love to have you. We have a lot of fun. Our community's growing every day. Watchingthewatchers.locals.com is the place where you can join us to have some fun with our members. You can also join up on YouTube, get all the same stuff. The only thing is for our after party after the live streams here, we ask that you join us over on Telegram, which is where the after party continues. And the Telegram chat is where the fun never ends. We've also got our website, robertgovea.com. We're putting all the PDFs up here, okay? So if you're reading through the show, listening to the show, and you say, I want to see that PDF, or what did he highlight there, or whatever, you can certainly go over to robertgovea.com. Take a look. Oh, man, look at that thumbnail that we got for Byron Donalds. I like that. Historic run. Ooh, that's good. All right. So, for example, like here, this WTF SCOTUS, we should have some documents here. Hopefully we do. No, we don't. Do we go through documents? Oh, I know why, because I didn't save them like a doofus. But because that was a Saturday show. My apologies to my team. That's my fault, not theirs. But the other PDFs are here, so you can go through and see what's in there. And we love it when you sign up for our newsletter. It's our alternative way to connect, okay, in case anything happens on YouTube or elsewhere. Click here, sign up for the newsletter, and get access to the mind map and everything else that we're going to go through here in a minute. And so, without any further ado, my friends, no show sponsors on this live stream, but we will have a couple of breaks in there. We'll have live stream privilege today, so we'll just skip over them. So if you're wondering what's happening there, that will be for the segments later on. But now, let's get into it because we've got some business to attend to. Donald Trump goes wild. That comes after Judge Chutkan reverses herself on her gag order. And this is temporary. She knows that Donald Trump is filing an appeal saying, what are you talking about? How can you possibly gag me in the middle of an election season when I'm being prosecuted by Joe Biden, my chief political opponent? Does that seem fair at all? And she says, well, we're going to use local rule, whatever, 57.7C. She said, well, because I'm so scared of some possibilities that maybe some Trumpers are going to hurt somebody sometime somewhere doing something somehow, then we have to protect them. And so she says, all interested parties in this matter, this was the original order, including the parties in their counsel, are prohibited from making any public statements that target the special counsel prosecuting this case, Jack Smith, or his staff. Now, Trump, after that order went into place, he kind of put the lid on it, right? He wasn't talking so much about it. Also, defense counsel, she's throwing a bone to the defense, and any of this court staff or personnel, or this was the big one, this catch-all, any reasonably foreseeable witness or the substance of their testimony. You go, whoa, what? Like maybe the first one, the second one, and the third one, you can kind of, okay, whatever. But the fourth one, any reasonably foreseeable witness or the substance of their testimony, that's like everybody. It's not even specific. What do you mean foreseeable witness? There's like 1,000 people in this case, at least. So what is she talking about? So, okay, that was the original order. Now, Trump filed his appeal and Chutkan reversed herself. And here is the entry on this, very short. It is a minute entry order. And then as soon as we read this, we're going to see what Trump gets into because, man, he just goes wild on this thing. So she drops this one. She says on October 20th, after Trump notices that she's going to be appealed on that prior order, says upon consideration of Trump's opposed motion for a stay pending the appeal. In other words, the judge will just hold on to this thing, say, you're not gagged until I get further guidance from the Court of Appeals, saying that it is hereby ordered that the court's order and their opinion is administratively stayed to permit the parties to brief and the court to consider Trump's motion. It is further ordered that the government shall file any opposition by October 25, and Trump's going to reply 3 days later. Signed by Judge Tanya Chutkan. And so stayed means that's on pause, right? That is not in effect. And so Trump then has the opportunity to basically say whatever he wants about this within reason, right? And just to be clear about this, Trump can't break the law. Trump can't threaten and harass people. It's already illegal to do that. Trump can't influence and tamper with witnesses and all of those things, but he can call them out by name. And of course, let's take a look at what Trump says here right after a quick message from our friends. These are Trump's posts on Truth Social. And he, of course, is going wild now that the gag order has been lifted. And here are a couple of his posts. Here was one. He published this one. He said, the failing New York Times story leaked by deranged Jack Smith. Oh, there it is. That's the name. He wasn't allowed to say that, but now he is. And the Biden political opponent abuser DOJ about a red-haired weirdo from Australia named Anthony Pratt is fake news. I never spoke to him about submarines. I don't even know what this story is, but he says, but I did speak to him about creating jobs in Ohio and Pennsylvania, because that's what I'm all about. Jobs, a great economy, low taxes, no inflation, energy dominance, strong borders, no endless wars, and low interest rates, and much more. Maggie Haberman and the Misfits never called me for comment. Why would they? They just write anything they want. Whether it's correct or not is of zero importance to them. All the news that's unfit to print, that's why we call it fake news. All right, that's from Trump, right? Now, the first thing that stands out on this one is this post, this Truth Social post, was illegal just not too long ago. Okay, deranged Jack Smith, he was not allowed to say that at all. And that would have been a sanctionable offense, right? You violated a court order. She would have, ordered to show cause, brought him in there, scolded him, maybe fined him, done whatever. Or literally, could hold him in jail at some point, right? It might take a while for her to get there, but she theoretically could. And by the way, if this was not a former president, if this was somebody who was in a different position and they violated a court order, not that Trump has, right? They would do that. I've seen that happen. I've seen judges just enough of this, right? You're going right into custody. Now, there are complexities here because that is a regular defendant and not a president. And we also are in a situation where that might be justified, but this is a political prosecution and they're gagging him without legitimacy. So any type of recourse in response to Trump, in my opinion, is also illegitimate, right? So as we've said, now I'm never encouraging anybody here to violate a court order, the president included, even if it is illegitimate. But the point is, at some point, right, Trump might make that decision on his own. You have this immovable force going against an unstoppable object, and they're just hitting each other. It's the justice system and the free speech rights of Trump. And boom, as soon as the order comes down, deranged Jack Smith is out on full display. But that wasn't it. Trump also posted some other things. And again, we're hearing about witnesses. That was the judge's order. And she also talked about another gag order. Now, in the other gag order, this one is talking about the New York case. Remember, Letitia, he calls her Peekaboo James. And I don't really know what that's about. If anybody knows, be sure to enlighten us. But he's talking about that gag order because the New York gag order under Judge Engoron is a little bit more narrow, okay? The January 6th order that we just read said any reasonably foreseeable witness that might be involved. What on earth? That's like 1,000 people. Like Ray Epps is in that list, maybe. Because it was January 6th. It was a huge thing. So now we're asking the same thing. In the New York case, that provision was not in there. The judge was only talking about the judge, and so it's a more of a narrow order. So now he is responding to her, and I tie these together because the DC case referenced this type of conduct to justify her order. In other words, Judge Chutkan was saying Trump was harassing the New York judge's court clerk, the one who was whispering in her ear, Chuck Schumer's girlfriend or whatever Trump said. And that was essentially cause enough to justify Chutkan's authority to gag him in this case. So the DC judge looks over to New York, sees what Trump says about New York, makes decisions based on that, even though it didn't happen in her jurisdiction. So here's what Trump says about Tishy. He says, all right, look, in the fake Biden-inspired fraud case against me, brought by the corrupt Attorney General Letitia Peekaboo James of New York State, a sadly crime-infested place, CIP, capitalized, where people and businesses are fleeing to other states in record numbers, it is her and the highly partisan judge, Judge Engeron, who has been overturned many times, who defrauded me and the public by valuing my assets at a fraction of what they are worth in order to try and convict me, without a trial or a jury, of fraud. She got him to value Mar-a-Lago at $18 million, when it is worth 50 to 100 times that amount. My assets are worth much more than the listed on the 100% disclaimed financial statements. And there are no victims except me. We won on the statute of limitations and other things at the appeals court, and this all capitalized moving forward. And this radical left, Trump-hating judge refuses to accept their decision. This case should be dropped immediately. It's amazing. He is out of control and totally afraid of Peekaboo. A complete miscarriage of justice and election interference. Woo. So Trump is fired up, man, right? He's writing multiple capital letter sentences there, and I feel it too, man. It is out of control. It's insane what's happening. It's all over the place. It's like crazy town. And to somebody who loves the law, and practiced law for a long time and built a law firm around it, who cherishes the law, reveres the Constitution, loves the logic of it, made my life around it. It is insane to even think about what's happening all over the place and how even other lawyers, are not speaking out about it. And, there's a lot of them out there. Just like, well, it's like, it reminds me of that meme of that dog sitting in that burning house, right? A lot of other lawyers out there also know what's happening, but a lot of them are just staying quiet about it when it's happening in their jurisdictions, like in DC, like in New York. Like, where are the New York criminal defense attorneys or the DC criminal defense attorneys? I mean, I know they're out there, but I mean, as a general organization, like the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and all these big other entities, like, where are they as all of our historical, precedent is just being shattered every single day? I don't know. It is out of control, Trump. I feel it. And I agree with the exclamation points. But this is another one from Trump. He said, this is the fake news one. And he had one more. He said about Washington, D.C., which is where Judge Chutkan resides. And a big part of the order was about Trump influencing the jury pool, right? Every time Trump speaks, it wakes people up and it's accurate. And so the left doesn't want that to happen at all. Every time, Trump gets indicted, his poll points go up, and they need to gag him to stop this momentum. How does he keep growing? It's like every time he gets attacked, he engulfs their energy and becomes stronger. So he posted this about DC. And he said here, Washington, D.C. has become a dirty, crime-ridden death trap that must be taken over and properly run by the federal government. You might disagree with that one. It is and will be part of my election platform. We will clean it, renovate it, and rebuild it. And most importantly, make it safe. Right now, it is probably the most unsafe capital city anywhere in the world. And with this in mind, there is no way I can get a fair trial on a Biden election interference indictment in D.C. Obviously, at the appropriate time, if this ridiculous case should be allowed to proceed forward, which is, according to legal scholars, very doubtful, I will be making a demand for a venue change. Well, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, I would prefer that DC be disbanded, and I think that our representatives and our senators could all do with a little less together time. You know what I'm saying? You separate them back in their home states, and you can move different conventions around the country, but they don't all need to infest themselves in the gutters of DC any longer. We're tired of it. But that's a separate point. Now, I'm not a legal scholar, I'll admit that, but I have to share my concerns. I think that they're going to do everything humanly possible on this to get this case to trial. I have my doubts that this thing gets dismissed. I know that sounds crazy. I know. But we've been saying things sound crazy for as long as we've been here. It just gets crazier every day. So I think that they're going to want to convict him. They're going to try to get this case. The judge is going to do everything humanly possible to make the case stick. The Court of Appeals could come down. The Supreme Court could come in and deviate the plan, right? But unless that's the case, man, this is going to go. Like, they are going to do everything possible. This judge is not going to let this case go until after the election. I think most of their eggs are in this basket, quite frankly. The RICO case by Big Fani is not looking good. We'll get there in another segment. Florida case, that's Judge Cannon. They can't control that one as much. They're having difficulties there. Alvin Bragg's case is a joke. It's not even relevant. It's from 2015 and 16. And so this is the one. So Trump, I hope he's got better legal scholars than my analysis here. I'm sure he does. And I hope they're right about it. But I do have my concerns. Now, Trump is obviously upset about this, and he's out campaigning, and so he's got a couple things to say before we jump into the actual gag order that he's trying to overturn. We'll read through the analysis that his attorneys prepared for us. But this is what he said when they were out speaking, campaigning across America.
A highly partisan judge, a real political guy right out of the clubhouses, and he's been overturned many times by the appellate courts, and he defrauded me. They defrauded me because I have a house that's very valuable, and they try and make it like I'm increasing values. And honestly, it's a very conservative number, but they valued a house that's worth 100 times more than the number they used. Let's say 50 to 100. They valued it at $18 million, and people say it's worth anywhere from 50 to 100 and maybe even that more. They defrauded me, and he called me a fraud before I even got to court.
So Trump is speaking out about this, and he's, kind of tap dancing around. He's going to be tiptoeing around a lot of this stuff. So the New York gag order is a lot less broad. It's a lot more narrow, and so he has a little bit more leeway there. But remember, every time he speaks, Chutkan is listening to that and then incorporating that into her order. So I want to share now the actual argument that Trump is making. Like, what caused Chutkan to reverse this? And then this is the same argument, or large portions of what we'll see when the appellate memorandum is ultimately filed. Okay, so we'll see the appeal in full fruition when they draft that and submit that. But this is a pretty substantive overview of it. And so let's see what they have inside here. You can see this one's about 33 pages, and we'll see how long it goes, and we'll hit the highlights of it. But it is filed out of the District of Columbia, and this is President Trump's opposed motion, right? Jack Smith did not want this to happen, for a stay pending the appeal. And we're reading this for the appellate portion of this. Like, something in here caused Chutkan to reverse. So Trump's lawyers, they tell us, Your Honor, Judge Chutkan, no court in American history has imposed a gag order on a criminal defendant who is campaigning for public office. Least of all, on the leading candidate for president of the United States. So, Your Honor, in other words, this has never happened before, ever. Not for any candidate, not somebody running for mayor or dog catcher. But you just did it for the first time, and she did it through a local order. Did you see that? It was like local rule 70, whatever, DC rules, somebody wrote on the back of a napkin. Trump's team says this court's opinion and order is the first of its kind. And given its extraordinary nature, one would expect an extraordinary and compelling justification for the gag. But that is conspicuously absent. Instead, the court generically states that it must enter the gag order to prevent supposed threats and harassment, in quotes. This theory falters under even minimal scrutiny. First, as the prosecution Jack Smith concedes, President Trump has not unlawfully threatened or harassed anyone. So unsurprisingly, the prosecution presents no witness who they say feels threatened or harassed by Trump. Not a person. In fact, when asked at oral argument about evidence supporting this concern, Jack Smith's prosecutor said, well, of course this prejudice is speculative. We're not going to know if these witnesses are intimidated or if this threatening activity is intimidating other witnesses until folks testify at trial, and even then we may not know. So it's all speculative, right? They're just making it up in their head. They're like, well, it could happen. Trump says things and people do get freaked out, so maybe it'll happen here. And we made this point a long time ago, saying that Trump is going to insurrect America again, right? That's always been the talking point. He caused one insurrection, and so we have to stop him from insurrecting again. One way to do that is gagging him so that he cannot speak. Now, she's not saying that here, but that's essentially what she's saying. The court likewise cited no evidence on this point, made no specific findings, meaning the judge never said that there was any actual harm at all, and declined to give any meaningful consideration to the prosecution's lack of proof. They say these are fatal omissions. You can't just gag somebody without articulating the reason for it. A prior restraint, which is something that limits your ability to speak, okay? You are restrained prior to even saying something. It is such a major component of free speech. If you can't go out there and say something and somebody restrains you from that, that's a limit. So it cannot be based on speculation. Rather, the prosecution must actually demonstrate, according to case law, quote, a clear and present danger. So unable to justify the gag order based on Trump's actions, the prosecution pivots to third parties, right? Because Trump didn't do anything, so they got to say somebody else did. Saying that unnamed others outside of Donald Trump's control, President Trump, acted improperly before this case began. Such concerns cannot justify this gag. The Supreme Court has repeatedly explained that citizens of this country cannot be censored based on the fear of what others might do, says Brandenburg case from 1969 U.S. Supreme Court. This case says the constitutional guarantees of free speech and free press do not permit a state to forbid or to proscribe advocacy, except where such advocacy is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. Okay, that's the Brandenburg test that you hear a lot about. It's this two-part test. You see this and here? In order for the state to be able to limit your free speech, we have to have a two-part test. One, the speech is directed to incite, right? It's causing, it will direct, like the intention of the speech, the person doing the speaking, is directing it to incite imminent lawless action or incitement, and it is likely to actually cause that. Okay, so if somebody's just saying something, but it's not actually going to lead to that, that doesn't satisfy the second half of the test. So if some crazy person's just like, oh, let's go insurrect the Capitol, kind of like, the night before when Ray Epps was doing it. Okay, he was like inciting, like we're going into the Capitol the night before, but nobody was doing it. So, right, that was like, maybe it didn't actually produce that action. But the next day, right, you would say that maybe he would have met both standards because he was inciting, he was directing people into the Capitol, and it was likely to produce that action, right? He was actually screaming into the Capitol, even the day of, guiding people to the Capitol building. So that's one example where, if Ray Epps was doing the same thing, inciting people, a month before January 6th, it's not likely to produce an action, so that would fail. So the point is, right, that's sort of talking in a criminal context, but you get how the test works. Now, equally important, the government, Jack Smith, submitted, and the court considered no evidence, zero, on the critical question of whether alternative non-speech restricting measures might be effectively advanced to protect the witnesses. If people are scared about being attacked by Trump's advocates or whatever, what else can we do? This resulted in a breathtakingly overbroad gag order that, outside of a handful of narrow exceptions, prohibits any public comment regarding a wide and undefined set of individuals and subjects, right? It's monster. Any reasonable foreseeable witness is what the judge says. So in doing so, the gag order, it shields public officials in the highest echelons of government from criticism, and that includes key political rivals. Trump's defense continues. At the bottom, gag order violates virtually every fundamental principle of our First Amendment jurisprudence. It imposes an overbroad, content-based prior restraint on the leading presidential candidate's core political speech. Notwithstanding the Supreme Court's instruction that the First Amendment rights have their fullest and most urgent application precisely in the conduct of campaigns for political office, where you're making your redress of grievances. You're saying that the institution of the DOJ and the DC Circuit are illegitimate. You are running on that, and you want to change that. And the American people see you say that, and they want you to say that because they're going to vote for you for that. And then the court says, well, you can't talk bad about our prosecutors who are totally legitimate, and you can't talk bad about our courts. What? That's the whole point of politics. Now, likewise, by restricting President Trump's speech, the gag order eviscerates the rights of us, my friends, of us, his audiences, including hundreds of millions of American citizens who the court now forbids from listening to Trump's thoughts on important issues. And I was furious about this when they threw him off Twitter, too. How dare they deny us the right to hear from him? Now, neither the prosecution nor the court come close to justifying these restrictions. Instead, in a dizzying irony, the gag order lists a long list of Supreme Court cases that protect civil rights of criminal defendants in hopes of silencing the criminal defendant in this case. This is a violation of the First Amendment, and it's egregious and intolerable. And so accordingly, this judge should immediately stay the gag order pending appeal. They say that Trump, as we know, is the 45th president of the United States and the leading candidate in the election that's coming up. He has dominating leads in the Republican nomination race, and he leads President Biden, the executive who's currently prosecuting him in general election polling. Trump's political speech reaches the largest audience in American history, including over 100 million followers on social media across several platforms and countless other citizens who listen to President Trump's messages in person, TV, and elsewhere. And so the prosecution filed this indictment. Now, as this case is pending, Trump continues to campaign for president, and one of his core messages is specifically that these prosecutions against him are part of an unconstitutional strategy to attack and silence the Biden administration's chief political rival. To advance this message, Trump has made many public statements criticizing individuals that he believes are wrongly prosecuting him, including Biden, Garland, Jack Smith, and his team. And this viewpoint, which is his political opinion, that the prosecution is politically motivated, is one shared by countless Americans, including myself and many of you. On September 15th, the prosecution filed a motion to impose a gag order on Trump. They keep thinking that this action is going to hurt Trump, and they indict him. Polls go up and up and up. They get a mugshot released, and people make t-shirts about it. So they try to gag him. They seek sweeping restrictions on his political speech, and they made three main arguments. One, they claimed that he was prejudicing the jury pool. They say that second, that Trump was attempting to undermine confidence in the criminal justice system, which they're doing themselves, by prejudicing the jury pool. And third, and that the expansive content-based restrictions were necessary to prevent threats and harassments to third parties. That was Jack Smith's argument. One, juries. Two, confidence in the justice system in general. And then three, that it was necessary to protect the people. So now the court declined to adopt the first argument, and for good reason. There's no evidence that the jury pool has been affected by any of this. And the court also declined to credit the prosecution's amorphous and constitutionally invalid concern about, quote, public confidence in the court's ruling. Instead, the judge did something pretty sneaky here. In crafting the gag order, the court looked to the prosecution's last argument and said that witnesses and prosecutors and court personnel have somehow, miraculously, been intimidated or harassed. However, in making this claim, the prosecution did not present any evidence that Trump harassed anyone. Rather, the prosecution relied exclusively on the allegation that third parties with no relationship to Trump engaged improperly with political actors, most of whom had already been criticized by millions of people across the country before Trump even commented on them. Trump comments on stories once they've already gotten big. Okay, these people come into Trump's zone when they've already reached, the mainstream. So he's already commenting on them. So the prosecution also, and they're general people, also the prosecution did not submit any evidence that, one, any member of its team has been threatened or harassed. So nobody on Jack Smith's, very sensitive team over there, highlighter team, has been harassed. That any potential witness has actually felt threatened or harassed by Trump's speech. That Trump made any public statement about any court staff other than the judge herself, which he's allowed to, or that any alleged threat, harassment, or intimidation could not be addressed by other means. Never addressed any of that, Judge. Nonetheless, Chutkan entered the gag order, and it stops Trump from making statements that target special counsel Smith or any reasonably foreseeable witness and their testimony. Now, in entering the gag order, the court relied heavily on the anticipated reactions, whatever they just expected, of unidentified independent third parties to Trump's speech. So Trump says something, some made-up entity, probably the MAGA extremists, domestic, homegrown, violent MAGA extremists that Joe Biden was talking about from his Gates of Hell speech. The court found that when the defendant, Trump, has publicly attacked individuals, including on matters related to this case, they get threatened and harassed. But the court cited no evidence that Trump's statements, as distinct from the statements of others, caused the harassment. Right now we're talking about causation. You're saying that these people were harassed. Show me the statement from Trump that caused the third party to do the harassing. So they say there isn't any, okay? Notwithstanding the complete lack of evidence, the court found that Trump's statements pose a, quote, significant and immediate risk, and that witnesses will be intimidated, and that they could be targeted for harassment and blah, blah, blah. They say, based on these perfunctory findings, unsupported by evidence, the court imposed sweeping restrictions on Trump's core political speech. And then the court, which we read, then the court entered a carve-out. Now they said, this order shall not be construed to prohibit Trump from making statements criticizing the government generally. That's good, because he's in a campaign. Thank you, Judge, for permission. Including the current administration or the DOJ. So he can say, like, the DOJ is corrupt, but not Jack Smith. Statements asserting that Trump is innocent, he's allowed to say that. Or that his persecution is politically motivated. Or statements such as, so he can say that, okay, his prosecution is politically motivated, but he can't presumably talk about Jack Smith because she already said that by name. Or statements criticizing the campaign platforms or policies of current political rivals like Mike Pence, I guess, would be allowed. So they say, okay, thanks, Judge, for those really ridiculous carve-outs. Now, despite the extraordinary breadth of these restrictions, the court held in conclusory fashion that Trump's statements pose sufficiently grave threats to the integrity of the proceedings that cannot be addressed by any other alternative means. And it's tailored its order to meet those threats. But the court did not explain, as it must, how nearly all public statements regarding hundreds of individuals and topics, sans the three narrow carve-outs, how those statements pose a clear and present danger to any compelling interest, meaning it's not constitutional to limit Trump's free speech. It is a constitutional right violation to stop him from being able to speak during a campaign while he's being prosecuted. Now, nor did the court cite any evidence or provide any analysis to support its conclusion that less restrictive means were unavailable to address the threats. It did not address any alternative means at all. So when you're in law school and you do it's called strict scrutiny analysis, the government does something that impinges upon somebody's constitutional rights, and you say, can the government do that? And you ask yourself, is this the least restrictive thing that the government can do, and is it absolutely necessary to achieve a compelling government interest? And so if those two things are met, usually you'll find that the government can do the thing. But it has to be, there is no other alternative. There's nothing less restrictive that the government can do. It's the absolute last resort. And the judge didn't even do that analysis, didn't even ask. Like, could we hire private security for these witnesses? Or could Trump, or anything else, basically the court could do. Now, the statements above were the sum total of the court's finding. That's it. That's all she found regarding its constitutionally mandated task to narrowly tailor its order and to exhaust all of the alternative means before gagging Trump. And so the judge, because she didn't do that, the analysis is so bad. They're going to give us what the legal standards are for appeal and all the things. And they're going to tell us that, this is going to be equitable. And we'll fast forward to the conclusion. They say, listen, for the reasons stated above, the court should stay the gag order pending the conclusion of all the appellate proceedings challenging it. The court should also immediately enter a temporary administrative stay to remain in effect pending the outcome of this ruling. Bunch of stuff here. Now, if the court does not enter a temporary administrative stay, we respectfully request that the court issue a ruling, and the court has obviously done that. And so the gag order has been, in fact, temporarily lifted. And there are many things to glean from this. The question is, does Chutkan think that there maybe is a basis for an appeal? Or is she doing this formulaically? We don't know. But we do have some thoughts on this and some reaction. So in Trump's gag order out of New York, we turn our attention over to this news site, and they're having some comments about this. Here's what they say.
Judge in New York slapped a $5,000 fine, which was just a minor fine because he violated the gag order, But the warning there is that he could actually be imprisoned, Donald Trump, for continuing to threaten court personnel, potential witnesses, prosecutors.
And look, this judge managed to get Donald Trump to take down one of the quote-unquote threatening emails and lies that he put out there.
It wasn't threatening.
Yes,
You're
there's
right.
no
Quote,
question
unquote.
that I think Mr. Trump is in major trouble. Sidney Powell is not just some random lawyer that represented Donald Trump. She was in the Oval Office. She was there when they were concocting this wild-eyed strategy.
Talking about martial law and seizing voting machines.
She wanted to be special prosecutor to do all of this stuff. This, I think, will have a domino effect, and I also think it's going to impact his messaging. When people around him, people who knew what the thinking was, can now be unleashed to testify against him and against others, I think the wheels are going to turn.
All right, so I don't think so. I don't think that Sidney Powell or Kenneth Chesebro is going to do much of anything, and we'll get to that in a later segment. But she's talking about Trump and his reaction to these things and saying that his strategy might change, his voice might change. I think it's going to stay mostly the same. He's going to say that they're all illegitimate everywhere you turn. They're part of a coordinated, orchestrated attack on his candidacy, literally. Okay, you've got Alvin, you've got all of the civil cases. They move statute of limitations around in New York so that Bergdorf gal could be Bergdorfed, in front of all of us talking Bergdorfing. And it's just that plus the 4 other criminal cases, New York, Florida, Georgia, now DC. It is a full-on attack to remove a candidate that they don't want to win from the field. And so he's, in my opinion, totally within his First Amendment rights, clearly, to comment on it. But they are asking more people about this. So this is Representative Warnock. He shows up on MSNBC's latest show and has a conversation with Inside Jen Psaki. Here's what that sounds like.
There's obviously a big case that's coming up in Fulton County. It's ongoing, of course.
Georgia.
And I'm not going to ask you to predict anything there. But the outcome of that, as a uniter, which I think you definitely are, the outcome of that could be the conviction of Donald Trump, and it could be jail time for Donald Trump. Do you think he should serve jail time if he's convicted?
I believe in equal protection under the law. I believe that nobody is above the law.
What about having your
Nobody.
free speech enforced?
And
Is anybody below the law? Do some people get free speech rights and some people don't?
Donald Trump deserves his day in court
Oh, good.
before a jury of his peers.
Oh, like in D.C.?
And in this case, these will be the people of Georgia who I am deeply honored to serve.
Oh, in Georgia.
But do you think if he's convicted, and I ask this question because there are different
In
schools of
Fulton
thought,
County, in Fani's
that
court.
if you put a former president in jail, despite all of the things that he did, that would be a divisive move for the country. There are other things that could happen. He could be in Mar-a-Lago. He could be under house confinement. Do you think there's an approach that would be better for the country
Listen
moving
to these
forward, given that there's also a lot of people who would like to very much see him in jail if he's...
A lot of people out there really enjoying themselves on these conversations, okay? Now, I wasn't intending to get into this. I hadn't listened to this clip before, but we are hearing 2 people really indulging in this where is Trump going to be housed conversation. And it gets a little weird out there. We'll play through this clip, but you start to get a little weird. You're going to see a lot more of this as the trials start to percolate. And you might have come across clips where it's like multiple people all just talking amongst themselves about the penalty that Trump is going to endure, and they almost are like giddy. It's really a gross thing. Let's see what happens. I'm not sure.
Convicted.
First of all, let me just say that I do believe in equal protection under the law. Donald Trump, even in the midst of all the things we've heard with him on tape saying, can you find me a few more votes? He's innocent until proven guilty.
That's good. That's true.
And so I don't want to get ahead of that process. I respect the judicial process. But I do think that it is a test of the maturity of a democracy to see whether or not we live up to the principles that we hold up.
We are not. Let me tell you that right now. We are not. Equal protection under the law is a nice thing to say, but when people drop below the law, like when they don't even get free speech, when they don't even get discovery, when they don't even get the evidence to read, how is that equal protection of the law? We're supposed to protect our defendants against this over-encroaching government. But they're having a difficult time on that inside Jen Psaki at MSNBC and the latest show over there. And so, my friends, now we'll get some more rulings on this. Of course, we'll see what the Court of Appeals says when that comes back down. We'll be here continuing to cover. Thank you for inviting someone over here to see exactly what they're doing to Trump and help them understand how this is working, how the mechanics are unfolding in Washington, D.C. Thank you for sending them over here. Thank you for subscribing, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right. But we're not done here yet. We've got some more J6 stuff to attend to. And this one comes from Jack Smith. And so let's see what he says. Jack Smith, special counsel prosecuting Trump, responds to Trump's motion claiming presidential immunity. And we've read through Trump's filing saying, as the actual president, the leader, the commander-in-chief, you do, in fact, have additional powers that other people do not have, like the pardon power, where you get to tell people that you are exonerated from breaking the law. The president is literally above the law. The commander-in-chief power, the opinion clause power. There's all sorts of powers that are literally unique to the president. And one of Trump's arguments is saying that the actions that he has been indicted for were immune as a result of his presidency. Jack Smith has issued his response to this in a 54-page filing that we'll read through as we await Trump's reply. So remember, Trump is going to get the final word, and so make sure you're subscribed to get the reply to the response. But this is what Jack Smith said. This one is a 54-pager. We'll just hit the highlights so we're aware of what his arguments are here. But this is Jack Smith's response in opposition to Trump's motion to dismiss. It's a giant motion, right? Trump wants the whole case gone. And it's based on presidential immunity grounds. So you'll see this is what Jack Smith says. Table of contents, we've got the factual and procedural background. We'll read through it. He's saying Trump has no immunity from federal criminal provision. He's going to talk about the Constitution and a bunch of case law. And we'll hit the highlights here and see what they are saying and see if we can unpack some of it. But a lot of cases are being cited, a lot of the Constitution and various treatises and other authorities as we're fast forwarding in to Jack Smith. And let's see who wrote this one. Is this Molly or is this somebody else? It is Pierce, James Pierce. Okay, good. We haven't heard much from him. We've actually heard a lot more from Molly Gaston, who's Highlighter Girl, and Thomas Wyndham, who I think is the more senior assistant. And so let's get back over to the introduction and see what Jack Smith says for us here. All right. This is special counsel Jack Smith writing. He says, defendant Donald Trump moves to dismiss the indictment, asking the court to afford him absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for what he claims was official conduct during his presidency. Now, they say this novel approach to immunity would contravene the fundamental principle that no man in this country is so high that he is above the law. They say Trump is not above the law. He is subject to the same criminal laws like more than 330 million other Americans, including members of Congress, judges, and everyday citizens. Now, none of the sources that he points to, including the Constitution's text and structure history and tradition or Supreme Court precedent supports the absolute immunity he asks the court to create for him, which I don't obviously think he's doing at all. I think that this thing exists. He's not asking the court to create it. That's Smith's, interpretation. We'll get there. I'll hold off on commenting until we give it a little time. Now, in staking his claim, he purports to draw a parallel between his fraudulent efforts to overturn the results of the election that he lost, conclusory statement there, right? This is part of the argument, right? This is part of the argument. I can't help myself, sorry. The argument is that the election was fraudulent and he was not breaking the law by enforcing the investigation of the fraud, okay? He is the chief executive of the whole country. He has a duty to ensure that we have free and fair elections. And if he does not investigate a fraudulent election, that is a dereliction of duty. So, right, they're just saying that he lost it, and we're saying that's debatable. In fact, a lot of evidence has come out to support the idea that it was in fact rigged, no matter in a million different ways, however you want to splice it. But they say he and the likes of the Gettysburg Address and the George Washington's farewell address. He says these things are not alike. The more apt parallel that he identifies is judges that he says are also enjoying absolute immunity from civil damages. But for the reasons set forth below, Trump's motion to dismiss based on immunity should be denied. All right, let's see what else we got. They say a grand jury charged the defendant in a 4-count indictment. Now he says that he's, quote, absolutely immune from prosecution. They say, Your Honor, you have to consider all of this as a whole if you want to dismiss. They say count 1, which charges a conspiracy to defraud, alleges that Trump conspired to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 election. The indictment also alleges that they tried to accomplish that in 5 ways: deceit toward state officials, subverting the results, organizing fraudulent states of electors, sending those, leveraging the DOJ, enlisting the vice president, directing supporters to the Capitol to obstruct the proceeding, right? All that's in there, and exploiting the violence. Now, counts 2 and 3 all incorporate these charges, blah, blah, blah. They say Trump's recognizes, but he fails to adhere to the legal standards here. Instead, he tries to reframe all of this. He says that communications with the Department of Justice and investigating election crimes are all legitimate, which they are. Communications with state officials is legitimate, is Trump's arguments. Communications with the vice president, you're allowed to do that. Organizing alternative slates of electors is all okay. They say, but those characterizations are not consistent with the indictment. They're saying, okay, here are the 5 things that Trump, we're indicting Trump for doing these bad 5 things. Trump's saying I'm allowed to do those 5 things. They're saying they're not consistent. Here's why. An individual who has served as the president of the United States but is no longer in office may face investigation, indictment, and trial if convicted, and punishment for conduct committed during the presidency. Now, you'll notice here, there's no citation on that, which is like, what? Why is that not cited? Let's see. The court has never alluded, so like this is cited, right? The court has ever alluded to the existence, no court has ever alluded to the existence of absolute criminal immunity for former presidents. Oh, is that true? Has any presidential candidate been indicted like this before? So it's never been an opportunity when he's running. Legal principles, historical evidence, and policy say that once out of office, a former president is subject to federal criminal prosecution like other citizens. Well, that might be true, but the conduct that Trump is alleged to have violated was committed while he was still the president. So these motions are just so ridiculous, okay? It's not even on point. Like other citizens, no court has ever alluded. They say he's out of office. Great, but he's being charged for January 6th, okay? Biden didn't come into power until 2021, January 21st, I think it was. No longer in office. You're charging him for conduct while he was in office. So like all of this is basically irrelevant, in my opinion. Indeed, a contrary rule would violate the fundamental principle that no one in this country, not even the president, is above the law, which is such a dumb statement. Like literally, what is a pardon? Okay, somebody gets prosecuted by the law. They get indicted, convicted by a jury of their peers. the president with a magic wand says this: pardoned. I'm above the law. Guess what? Now you are too. It's idiotic. Like, it's such a dumb statement. They keep repeating it. But the defendant's novel request for absolute immunity directly conflicts with the Constitution's impeachment clause, which expressly, this is so bad, which expressly contemplates the criminal prosecution of a former president for acts committed during and ultimately resulting in the president's removal from the presidency. Right. Yes, they're proving our point that Trump should have been indicted. He was impeached. That was the indictment. And he was tried in the Senate and not convicted. And if you read the rest of that, in fact, we probably will. Let's see if they pull it up for us. If not, we'll pull it up. That says that after the conviction in the Senate, then you can indict them criminally. Okay? You go through the political trial first, then you can apply the civilian stuff. Now, they say that provision ensures, among other things, that an officer who has been removed through impeachment, removed. Trump was not removed ever. They tried twice, not ever. Cannot seek refuge in the principles of double jeopardy to avoid criminal prosecution. Okay. Trump has not been removed. So what is this like? If you're in law school, they're like, this is not even relevant. Okay. Why are you citing things that don't apply here? The defendant, however, would turn the impeachment judgment clause on its head and have the court read it as a sweeping grant of immunity that forbids criminal prosecution in the absence of a Senate conviction, which is right, which, among other things, would effectively preclude any form of accountability for a president who commits crimes at the end of his term. Not true. You could have impeached him for those crimes when he was out of office. Okay, the Senate had their trial when Trump was out of office, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that's right. They had a whole proceeding. He wasn't even in office anymore. So it's ridiculous. It's not true. They could impeach him after the fact, and they could, at that moment, declare he cannot run again. Now, the defendant dismissed this very approach to the impeachment clause as nonsense and a complete canard during his impeachment trial, which it is, and the court should do the same here. A president already enjoys two forms of immunity designed to afford protections to the discharge of his duties. But neither the temporary immunity from criminal liability that an incumbent president enjoys while in office, nor the absolute immunity that they currently enjoy from civil liability. Nixon was civilly liable for his actions in firing somebody, suggest the existence of an unprecedented form of absolute immunity from criminal liability. To the contrary, they say the existence of both immunities is premised on the availability of criminal liability once a former president is out of office. Therefore, his motion to dismiss should be denied. Now, let's just take a quick look at, well, let's come back to it. Let's see if they pull it up for us. Even if the defendant has satisfied his burden to establish that a former president could claim some novel immunity for acts committed during his presidency, denial of the motion is nonetheless warranted. Okay, wow. So they're even admitting that. Like, Your Honor, even if you think that he might have some presidential immunity, don't dismiss our case, which the judge will not, right? Motions to dismiss are very hard to get rid of. This is Judge Chutkan's courtroom, by the way. Recognizing immunity from federal criminal prosecution for a former president would pose substantial challenges regarding its scope and application, and Trump provides no suggestion for how to navigate that. At minimum, any such criminal immunity, consistent with Fitzgerald in the balancing of other cases, would be narrower than other things. Trump has not shown that the conduct alleged in this indictment would fall within the boundaries of any understanding of immunity. So, in other words, they're saying, you have this immunity bubble for certain things. Some things we're very clear about. That's immune, that's not immune, right? If you're a doctor, for example, and you're operating on a patient who's not conscious, okay? There's some things that are within your bound that you're allowed to do. And if you do something outside of the bounds, right? Some things you'd be immune from because you're operating within the confines of your insurance will pay for that, and you're not liable for those things. Here's an example. I'm not a doctor. But the same thing, right? If you do something outside of those bounds, right, you are you clearly have broken the law, stuff like that. This is saying that Trump's immunity is not within that hula hoop. So dismissal is inappropriate because Trump cannot claim that every allegation in the indictment is protected by the president's official responsibility, and therefore it would be immune. They give us some argument. They say, unlike the express immunity in the speech and debate clause, okay, Congress has immunity, no provision in the Constitution grants immunity to a sitting president. The Constitution provides the president removal, here we go, through impeachment and conviction of treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors. That's the impeachment clause. Now, here's the second half of that. The impeachment clause further provides that although the sole punishment the Senate may impose is removal and disqualification, the impeached and convicted officer, okay, so once they go through the actual impeachment in the House, it goes over to the Senate for a trial. Trump was acquitted both times, but if he had been convicted, the convicted officer, quote, this is the Constitution, shall nevertheless be liable to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to the law. So once you have been convicted politically, then they can hit you criminally, would be the theory. So the Supreme Court has not addressed, not happened yet, a sitting or a former president's claim of immunity for criminal liability, but it has said so in civil. In the civil case, Nixon was being sued for a discrimination lawsuit. We'll fast forward through all of that. They said that Nixon was immune. Long story short. Now we fast forward through that. Now that was only civilly. They're going to distinguish that. But no legal principle supports the conclusion that Trump is immune for conduct undertaken during his presidency. They say they don't have supporting documents, Trump's people. And while some have disagreed with the long-standing view, listen to this. The truth is that presidential amenability to criminal prosecution, whether presidents can even be prosecuted at all, right? It's been the subject of extensive debate ever since the founding, which is strange because they keep telling us no one's above the law like it's a matter of fact, but that's not in fact true. And while some have disagreed with the DOJ's long-standing view that a sitting president may not be indicted, tried, convicted, or punished, there has been universal agreement that a former president may be subject to federal criminal prosecution, a principle recognized in the Constitution and rooted in historical practice. Again, citation please on that. Would like to see that, right? Now, this is missing a bunch. It's missing a citation, and it's also not giving us any authority to, here's the question, a former president may be subject to criminal prosecution for what? For activity in office? Like, you're missing all of that. Like, yes, if Trump leaves office and then goes and, embezzles $1 trillion from somebody or whatever, or goes and hangs out with Hunter Biden and they, go hit Malibu. Like, yeah, he could be indicted for that. Okay. If he walks out on Fifth Avenue and starts blasting people or something, right? You get the visuals. He could be indicted for that clearly. Obviously, that's a crime. But he was in office when all of this was happening. And the conduct happened in office, which means he's subject to the political trial process, not yours. But they're just missing everything. And they're doing this intentionally because these are not stupid lawyers, probably. Moreover, the justifications that cause the Supreme Court to recognize absolute civil immunity does not require criminal immunity. And so, which is kind of asinine. It's like, if they thought that it was important for civil, why would it also not be important for criminal? Like, people can sue you, and that's a major liability for the presidency. It's the same thing. Prosecutors can just prosecute you. So they say extending absolute immunity from civil to criminal would be inconsistent with logic. They say Trump says that his status as former president gives him absolute immunity. But if we accepted this, it would undermine this bedrock principle that no man in this country is so high that he is above the law. That's a U.S. Supreme Court case. Okay, so you see what they're citing? They're citing like dicta, right? It's meaningless. It's just irrelevant to the opinion. Now, I haven't read United States versus Lee, but I would guess that that is not really consequential to the outcome of the case. Does anybody in that case have a claim to be above the law? No. Is there a president in there? I don't know. Maybe there was. 1882. Was that Robert E. Lee? Maybe it's him. Okay, but was he the president of the United States? I don't know. It's inapplicable is my point, but they have extrapolated this and they apply it to Trump. They say the principle extends, this is from the same case, the principle extends to all the officers of the government from the highest to the lowest. Is the president an officer? Requiring every man who by accepting the office participates in its functions, and they're strongly bound to that supremacy. And they say, and the principle that no one is above the law applies, of course, to a president. They have another case from Trump versus Vance. So they're trying to bootstrap that opinion. And I don't know how that gets into immunity, but they say in choosing to break from the monarchy, they say the president, yeah, this is the point. Trump is not above all of the laws. He is subject to impeachment and removal. And upon removal, he can then be indicted. All for conduct within the presidency that he presided over. The principle that no one is above the law underlies the universal consensus that a president may be subject to criminal prosecution. Look at, they even admit it at some point. We concede that, by the way. That is point conceded. Got it. The United States has long taken the position that the Constitution affords a sitting president temporary immunity from criminal prosecution until the conclusion of his term, though some have disagreed with that. But Trump can identify no support that he's forever entitled to absolute immunity for any conduct while he served as president. This is so weak that it actually makes me think Trump's argument is that much stronger. Honestly, it feels like they're grasping at this. That a president may face criminal prosecution for conduct during a presidency when no longer in office draws support from the Constitution and historical practice. Like they're really stretching. They're having a hard time distinguishing Trump and his, like the conduct was during the presidency. They have a real problem there. They can't separate it out. They say two constitutional provisions support the conclusion that a former president does not possess absolute immunity. They say we can infer that because the founders specifically gave it to the legislature, and they didn't specifically give it to the executive. Therefore, we can infer that they didn't intend to. Now, we know the Constitution's silence on this is not dispositive. And in Fitzgerald, the Supreme Court case, civilly, they granted it. But the silence is telling when placed against the impeachment clause, right? So they admit, because the other court found that even though it's silent, it doesn't say that, it doesn't mean that there's no immunity there. It clearly exists for civil. But that silence is telling when placed against impeachment, which expressly contemplates criminal prosecution. They even admit this, following impeachment and conviction. It's wild. So where they admit, right, even in this motion, that the Constitution expressly admits you can prosecute after impeachment and conviction. But where a president or any federal officer has been impeached by the House and convicted at an impeachment trial in the Senate, then the clause says that they shall nevertheless be liable according to the law. They say it would be incongruous to conclude that the Constitution shields a president where it says here that he may be subject to prosecution after impeachment and conviction. This is so dumb. It's unbelievable. So here's what they're saying. A president doesn't have blanket immunity. I mean, I understand what their argument is, right? They're saying he doesn't have blanket immunity. How do we know that? Well, because he can be convicted. Once he's convicted in the Senate, then we can prosecute him, which means that immunity doesn't exist generally, is what they're saying. And you just gotta, I mean, it's a wild argument. It's terrible. But the immunity could be breached, right? Like the president might have that immunity They find by the political process that he has been acting outside of the scope of the presidency. That is a violation of his political oath. He gets convicted. Then he no longer has that immunity because he's been convicted. Then you can prosecute him for the crimes. But that has never happened here. And they're just saying that because you could theoretically prosecute him after a Senate conviction, that somehow means there is no immunity in the first place. Which is just, it's like, this is kind of basic stuff. It's like piercing the corporate veil, right? You've seen this in other areas of the law. Like you form a corporation, you're protected against liability from that corporation or an LLC until the LLC or somebody breaches the corporation, breaches the protection of that, and then you lose it. You have powers and then you lose them, okay? You have the pardon power when you're in office and then you lose it. You have the immunity until you're politically found to have violated that, then you don't. So they say it would be all the more strained to reach that conclusion in light of the impeachment system. Under the Constitution, he's subject to impeachment. And they say it's inconsistent. They say his argument that impeachment is the, quote, exclusive method is incorrect. As noted, you can impeach and then criminally prosecute, which again, they admit, they understand that's the standard, but then they keep forgetting about that second half. You got to have the conviction. They say if Trump's theory that a criminal prosecution is only available when preceded by an impeachment and a conviction were correct, it would either completely shield a former president for criminal prosecution for crimes while committed in office, but discovered afterwards, which I don't agree with. I think they could impeach him after the fact, as they've done. Or it would require that Congress initiate impeachment proceedings against a former president. Exactly right. That's exactly right. It would require that, which is not a big deal. They can absolutely do that because they've already done it. It's not a big deal. But the impeachment clause does not empower Congress to control the core executive act of prosecution through the political impeachment process. All they have to do is just impeach him again. They already did that once. They say Trump's argument also flatly contradicts his claim during his second impeachment proceedings. And they talk about those arguments. They say separately his immunity claim in the fact of an acquittal as distinct from merely a conviction fares no better. And so they just keep going on. Look, a lot of citations here. We're going to fast forward through some of this. They say historical evidence from the time of the founding likewise confirms that a president was subject to prosecution when no longer in office. They say Alexander Hamilton wrote about this, said that an impeachment would not terminate the chastisement of the offender. After having been sentenced to a perpetual ostracism from the esteem and confidence, he will still be liable to prosecution and punishment in the ordinary course of the law. Of course, no doubt. After an impeachment, after the trial and the removal, after the conviction. They're forgetting all of that. So we're going to fast forward through that. Chief Marshal, they're going back through some legislative history. I really feel like they're grasping here. Here, yeah, right now they're getting some Texas Law Review articles. Oh man, they're scrambling. When we start going to Law Review articles, this is not good for them. They say in Fitzgerald, which was the case for absolute civil damages, the court considered immunity as functionally mandated incident of the president's office, right? That's exactly right. Civil immunity is just necessary because it has to be. It's mandated as incident. It's related to the unique office. It's supported by our history. And so obviously that should still apply in this case, in the criminal case. Now, we'll fast forward. Actually, they say that Fitzgerald doesn't apply here. Why? The 5-justice majority talked about the separation of powers rationale And that if you go through their concurrence and their various opinions on that, that they, extrapolate some justification for it. So let's fast forward here and get to the conclusion and see how they wrap this up and specifically what they're asking for. In conclusion, you can see there's a lot here. And we're almost there. Wow, there's a lot more here than I thought there was. All right, so in conclusion, for the foregoing reasons, the court should deny Trump's motion to dismiss the indictment on the ground that the former president is immune from criminal prosecution. All right, pretty short conclusion there. And we'll see what the judge does on this one. Now, of course, Donald Trump will be issuing a reply to this. The way that this always works is you have Trump filed the original motion to dismiss. Jack Smith files the response. Trump gets the final layer on the sandwich, which will be the reply, and we'll see what he says, and that should be very good. We'll be looking forward to that. Overall impressions, not a great motion. I think that there is a lot more evidence here that Trump is immune, and I cannot wait to see what his reply says. It felt like they were grasping. They had a very difficult time separating civil from criminal. They had a difficult time talking about in-office conduct versus out-of-office conduct. And they were citing law review articles, and it's not very good. So we'll go through it, my friends. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing this video with a friend or a family member, for forwarding our newsletter to a friend or family member. You can sign up for that at robertgovea.com, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, and we've got one final segment on the day. We're going to turn our attention over to Fani, because this is some good stuff that we saw here coming out. Big Fani Willis may not have scored the victory that a lot of people say she did. She had 2 plea deals come through, but as we talked about with Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro, both of those cases are going to be dismissed. And do they implicate Trump at all? Even this guy, Andrew Weissmann, says maybe not. We're going to see what he said in a couple of posts, and then hear some reaction to those 2 plea deals, including from Trump, who had some comments about Sidney Powell that he made in public and that he posted on The Truth. But I wanted to share this with you. Remember that we had 2 plea deals that we covered, and there was a lot of fun to actually go through both those, Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro. And after the Chesebro proceeding, we heard Donald Trump's name come up a lot in that. Remember this. Chesebro pled guilty to count 15 of 41. And this guy, his name's Ryan Goodman, and he's over on the X, and he was a little excited about this. He said, listen, he said, here's the significance of the Chesebro guilty plea. He says the key is who can Kenneth most implicate? And we watched the whole thing. We're like, well, I don't know, nobody. He says 1, Giuliani, including getting a false electors, knowing that he was not contingent on litigation. Eastman? Could it be a giant step closer to, and very bad legal news for Trump? And there's Chesebro in there. There's Nathan Wade, who's, palling around with Big Fani. And we watched this plea deal, man, and this was a pretty good plea deal, I think, for the defense. They were excited about this. He got no jail time. He's going to have his entire case dismissed. The whole thing's going to go away. So what gives? Well, Goodman says, in court proceedings, Chesebro just admitted specific sets of facts that squarely implicates Giuliani, both state and federally. He says, look at this Georgia charge and the names of all the co-conspirators, right? This was the one that Chesebro pled guilty to. But this is it. This is the whole thing. It says, and the grand jurors in the name here, and Trump's name came up a bunch, and we were a little concerned about that until we started listening to it. And then we realized they were talking about the Trump campaign and not Trump individually. But here's what they say. That Chesebro specifically pled guilty to this. And I'm going to show you that Weissmann and others are saying this is not accurate. That on the 6th of December and the 14th day of December, these people, Chesebro pled guilty to this, unlawfully conspired to knowingly file the certificate of votes for the 2020 electors from Georgia, signing a document that contained the false statement, we, the undersigned, being duly elected and qualified electors from the state of Georgia for the vice president, hereby do declare blah, 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 right? They signed the letter. They filed the so-called false documents, okay? That's the felony. So that's basically all that he's got to talk about. I signed a document, mailed it off. I pled guilty to one felony of that. I'm Kenneth Chesebro. The charges will ultimately be dismissed, but I literally signed a piece of paper. Okay, that's all the facts that he basically did. We, the undersigned, being duly elected, filed it. And the defendants, acting as co-conspirators, incorporated, placed it in the mail, and they mailed the document to the chief judge of the Northern District of Georgia. And all of that was an overt act to affect the object of the conspiracy, and so on. So he didn't plead guilty to RICO. He didn't plead guilty to anything else other than signing a document, right? And we know they're pretty excited about that on the left. Plea deals and guilty pleas and blah, 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 even though I think they're having a difficult time distinguishing between a guilty plea and a guilty conviction. You can have guilty pleas all day long and never have a conviction. I've personally helped people get that done many times. Cases get dismissed. It's like it never happened. Pretty incredible. Exactly what's going to happen here. So as these individuals are excited about it, we have here, how does Michigan and Arizona and Pennsylvania not indict Chesebro now? Right? And why would also, by the way, why would Chesebro start talking if he's going to be indicted in other places? You see? He's already admitted to some conduct, but he's not going to start singing. Yeah, I was involved in this and this and this, and I helped Trump do that, and Trump did this, and blah, blah, blah. Of course not. Because the feds could indict him, Arizona could indict him. You've got this guy and others saying Pennsylvania should indict him, and Wisconsin should indict him. So they say he just admitted to facts that would make for crimes under those states' statutes, right? Want him indicted in multiple different locations. But this guy, Andrew Weissmann, who we often, poke at here, he is agreeing with us. Important caveat, and this was our analysis last week. A defendant who pleads only has to admit the elements of the crime to which they pled. Which is why Sidney Powell and, her specific charges were like hiring a third party, okay? Yes, she pled guilty, okay? But the elements of the crime for Sidney Powell were literally, she called somebody, hey, can you go, investigate this? They sent her a contract, crime 2. She signed the contract, crime 3. And lawyers hire third parties all the time to go do stuff, right? We had, at my law firm when I was there, we had, investigators on robocall, on dial, speed dial, blah, 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 all the time, working on our DUIs and all of our traffic stuff, going out and reassessing the scene, blah, blah, blah. Happens all the time. So Sidney Powell hires somebody. Can you go investigate this? Sure. They have a conversation. Solicitation, that's a felony. Signs a contract, right? Execution, and the list goes on and on. She gets charged 6 felonies, turned into all misdemeanors, 7 felonies, now 6 misdemeanors that will all be dismissed. And so when they bring her in there, they're not going to ask her about backroom meetings with Donald Trump. She's not going to testify to any of that. She's going to testify about hiring somebody, about signing a piece of paper, and about paying a bill. That's it. Same thing with Chesebro. Okay, it's going to be the same conduct. And they say, and not every fact or conspirator is going to be here. And we don't have reason yet to think that Chesebro has done more than the minimum. So same thing with Chesebro. So now Chesebro, even though Trump's name came up a million times, he's only going to talk about signing the piece of paper and putting it in the mail. Like, that is it. They're not going to, in my opinion, they're not going to get anything else out of these guys. Now, we'll see what happens on this. But even Andrew Weissmann is throwing some cold water on this. Hey, important caveat, guys. Calm down over there. A defendant who pleads only has to admit the elements of the crime. Hello. And not every fact or every conspirator. And we don't have a reason yet to think that Chesebro has done more than the minimum. And he's got a couple other posts on this, and so I clipped them. He says, look, here. People are wrongly assuming that Powell and Chesebro are now fully cooperating. Okay, if you're not familiar with him, we play him a lot because he's always on Inside Jen Psaki, and he's always talking to her about Trump, and he was involved in the original Mueller investigation, and so he is a lefty-ish lawyer, in my opinion. People are wrongly assuming that Powell and Chesebro are now fully cooperating. That still very much remains to be seen. Yeah, and there is reason to think that they are not, as they don't seem to have a global deal, including federal liability, which is the point about Jack Smith. All right, Sidney's not going to start talking. Chesebro's not going to start talking. I was involved in all these things, Fani. Any other questions? because then they're going to get indicted again. So obviously, these were smoking deals. Both of them are going to have their charges dismissed. For my take on it, when we covered it here last week, we were reading and listening, and we were expecting Chesebro to get 3 to 6 months of jail. Now he gets 0. Why? Because Fani's case is crap. That's why. And you can see here, he's making that, I think, point without making that point. They don't even have a global deal. They're not going to be talking about anything. And this is a great point that was also made. And he also says, if Sidney Powell has not provided the Georgia prosecutors the keys to the kingdom regarding Trump and others, then the misdemeanor no jail deal will be judged rightly later as a travesty, given what Powell did to undermine our democracy. Woo. Right? And so this is the other point about this. We've been seeing a lot of others make the point that Fani is just trying to take this case and get a victory as it relates to Donald Trump, but that any other conclusions here are being saved. Okay, so Sidney Powell doesn't matter because it's all to save it for Trump. And there was a great response to this from our friend. I'm trying to find this as I talk right now. There it is. Potentially criminal over on X. I was trying to find this thread. All charges will be completely dismissed was my point. Okay, people like Bradley Moss were saying Powell pled to 6 misdemeanors, Chesebro to a felony. Says the price will keep going up for old holdouts. Speak now or forever hold your peace. And I said, absolutely not true at all. I said, all the charges will literally be completely dismissed upon completion of probation. They will not be convicted of anything. Chesebro's felony will be gone in 3 years. Sidney's maybe a little longer. But then this fella, Alf, says, yes, that's the way it works. In the meantime, they will have to testify against the remaining defendants, and the prosecution didn't have to reveal their case strategy. Huge win for the prosecution. Is it? Really? Because Sidney Powell was like one of the masterminds. So she's going to have no convictions and it's going to go away. Potentially says, if you charge someone, and by the way, Sean is over on YouTube. So if you're not already subscribed to Potentially Criminal, you should be. His pronouns are LOL and bruh. Check it out. So if you charge someone with a crime that carries 20 years, as they did with Sidney, and then offer them a no jail time misdemeanor that's ultimately going to go away, you either overcharge them or you're unilaterally offering an extraordinarily irresponsible reduction in the appropriate punishment. Which is exactly right. Exactly right. Such a good point. They came out and told us that this was the end of the world, that Trump and Sidney insurrected America. Big Fani gave us a bunch of lectures about all of that. And Potentially Criminal's right. It's very irresponsible for them to do that. So were they lying then or are they lying now? Make sure you're subscribed to his channel. Criminal Defense. Good analysis there. And we've got more reaction as well. I think MSNBC is agreeing. You can hear this guy's a little excited about Sidney Powell. But then at the very end of this clip, at the very tail end, you're going to hear him say, yeah, actually, it might be harder for Fani than she thinks.
Start with that. Guilty pleas from the president's lawyer, or at least she was, Sidney Powell. How significant is that? What does it mean?
It's big. It means it shows the power of the racketeering laws, right? People who are caught on a racketeering indictment, they want to get out, and there could be many reasons. They actually did it, and they're getting a good deal from prosecutors. They don't have the money to fight, okay? And so this shows the power of it, and it's a great win for the prosecution. These are 2 witnesses who can certainly bring relevant, powerful evidence to convict the rest who go to trial, including Donald Trump. That said, I still think this sprawling indictment, even with the testimony of these 2 associates of Donald Trump, under the racketeering laws, could be more difficult for prosecutors than people expect.
Yeah, she's having a hard time on it over there, okay? She can't figure it out. She indicted like 19 people, and now she's getting how many convictions? So far, the ones we've covered, 0. And Not looking good for him. But did you hear his point about this, about how RICO is being used so broad and expansively, and people don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't have the resources? That's the point. They just go after everybody, right? They're going after Sidney, they're going after Chesebro, they go after everybody. And then when they don't have the case, they just give them a smoke and plea deal and just get rid of them. Because the pain has already been caused, the damage has already been done. It's a disgusting thing that's happening in America. It should not be happening this way. To coerce people into plea deals because they don't have time, money, or resources, because they're under the gun, under the scrutiny of a partisan political hack prosecutor in Fulton County, it's outrageous. Now, he admits that they're going to have some problems with it. I think you're starting to see those come to fruition. And Trump has also commented on this, and Sidney Powell in particular. And this is curious. But he says here, listen, Sidney Powell was one of millions and millions of people who thought, and in ever-increasing numbers still think correctly, that the 2020 presidential election was rigged and stolen, and our country is being absolutely destroyed because of it. True. Despite the fake news reports to the contrary, and without even reaching out to ask the Trump campaign, Miss Powell was not my attorney and never was. In fact, she would have been conflicted. Ms. Powell did a valiant job of representing a very unfairly treated and governmentally abused General Michael Flynn, but to no avail. His prosecution, despite the facts, was ruthless. Also true. He was an innocent man, much like many other innocent people who are being fully persecuted by this now fascist government of ours. And I was honored to give him a full pardon. And so that's a statement on Powell. Now, I think what he's probably articulating there is that she was not his personal lawyer and that she was a campaign attorney or something like that. But Trump gets asked about this because now people are saying, oh, well, what about attorney-client privilege? Are you saying that there's no attorney-client privilege between you and Sidney now? Or maybe that exists between Trump and the campaign or the Sidney and the campaign? We're going to see how this gets unpacked. But Trump got asked about this. Here is what he said.
President, you said Sidney Powell wasn't your attorney. Are you concerned that you won't be covered by attorney-client privilege?
No, not at all. We did nothing wrong. We did nothing. This is all Biden. Indictments and impeachments, and this is all about Biden. He can't do anything right. The only thing they know how to do is cheat on elections and election fraud. This is all Biden stuff. All of these indictments that you see. I was never indicted. Practically never heard the word. It wasn't a word that registered. And this was all done. This is dirty politics. This is third world country. This is banana republic, they call it. This has never happened here. Never happened here. Why? Because I protested an election, you get indicted? It's ridiculous. Look at the document case. I'm covered by the Presidential Records Act. Biden isn't. And now it's turning out that Biden's got a real problem with those documents. A real problem.
We'll see.
We
Special
did nothing
counsel.
wrong. He did. But when you look at the kind of thing, think of it, because I protested an election, and I'm, by the way, 100% right about that. In fact, we're going to be releasing some numbers next week that will make your head spin.
Yeah, that should be fun.
But think of that. You get indicted because you protested an election. You know how many...
All right, so that's Trump, and he is out campaigning, and he's talking about the election. I didn't do anything wrong. And even when he was asked about that, Sidney Powell, are you concerned, Mr. President, about attorney-client privilege? No, not at all. Show what's in the documents. We don't care. And I think that there's a lot to that, right? I think that these really are illegitimate prosecutions. I am actually not concerned about somebody coming in and opening the floodgates, because I don't think there was any criminality that happened there. Everything that he was doing was investigating an election, which was all legitimate and well within the purview of his office and his right to do that. So even Weissmann is saying, hey, sorry, everybody, calm down. Big Fani really stinking up the place over there. And so, of course, we'll continue to cover, my friends. Thank you for checking out and signing up for our newsletter at robertgovea.com. You can go there, get the daily reports sent to your inbox every day. And we'd appreciate you doing that so that we never lose contact with you in case something happens on YouTube. And that way you can forward the emails to friends and family and help expand what people know about what's happening in this country. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, my friends. Well, that is it on the day. We covered some good ground here today, and it's going to just get busier and busier from here. We've got a lot of good motions here. Of course, Weissmann's agreeing with us. Jack Smith denies that Trump has presidential immunity, and that motion was even weaker than I thought. Like, it feels pretty bad from their perspective. We'll see what the Court of Appeals does. But Chutkan also reverses herself on the gag order, and Trump is going to be appealing that. So we'll see what that looks like when it hits that docket. But now, my friends, it is time to hear from you and to see what you have to say about this. We're going to be checking out your comments, your questions, all from our friends at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, from our friends on YouTube, on the Rumbles, and elsewhere. And we're grateful that you joined us today. We'll be back here tomorrow to do it again. So same time, same place. Make sure you're subscribed if you're just joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We also are going to be here for our members only after party. So members, stick around. We're going to go through these comments, and then we'll see you at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. But before we jump into the comments, I wanted to give a special shout out to, this came in from, oh my goodness, what did I do with, I blanked out the name, and then I forgot where I put it because I wanted to protect this individual's privacy here. But let's see. This one, Gherkin Chiropractic is who sent this in. Gherkin Chiropractic. And look at this. Appreciate Rob and his show. Says, tried to do this through their website, but just couldn't figure it out. This is a donation over to ericshouse.org, an organization dedicated to helping people with suicide, overdose, and tragic death. Says, tell Robert to add this to the I'm going to match total. Thanks for all you do. Says, suicide affects every family. My prayers and blessings. This small gift helps those in need. $1,000. Oh my goodness. I'm going to be so broke. Matched. Coming over from Gherkin Chiropractic. Very generous, Gherkin. Thank you for that, my friend. Thanks for sending in the late dono. It's going to go to Eric's house. My match will go over there, and we're going to send some good love over there. ericshouse.org. Very generous. Gherkin Chiropractic. Thank you, Gherkin. I appreciate you. All right. We had a couple of other amazing donos come in, and this is where we're going to be starting right here with this nice kitty and this little duck. Here's where we're starting today. First of all, Lauren R is a new member. Lauren R is a new member. Welcome aboard, Lauren R. John McGarvey also bringing in some new members. We got No Japskis here, Heather F, Anon, Phil H, and Justin Y, all coming in courtesy of John McGarvey. New members. Members, we really try to deliver. We do member-only streams in the morning. We also do Saturday shows, and we'd love to see you there. So welcome aboard. And YouTube members, grab the Telegram link so we can see you on Telegram for our members-only after party as well. Dolphin Fan is the man, as per usual, bringing in 5 new members. Roxanne X2. Alex Jones is here. What's up, Alex? Oh my gosh. Oh man. Act like you've been here before, Rob. Don't get nervous. W8 Crime Network. RF is here. Sassy Tech is in the house. All coming in courtesy of Dolphin Fan is the man in the house. We got this one from Tony Hay Munkets. Says, 5 people are coming in. Third Proverb, John L, Ann Acism, William L, and Raza the Terrible. All coming in courtesy of Tony Hay Munkets. Been a membo and been very generous bringing in more membos. Thank you, Tony. This one came in. Jester Bob's here, says, I love watching the numbers go up as you get online. So once we go live, you like seeing the audience grow? Me too. I really like that too. I like it when it grows. When it grows, I like it too. Wendy K's here, says, yay, I was going to go spread dirt in the backyard, but too much to miss today. Tomorrow, ladies' problem. LOL. Yeah, the dirt will still be there tomorrow. All right. The dirt will be there tomorrow. Okay. It's not going anywhere, probably. Unless you want it to go somewhere, and maybe it will go somewhere. But it'll probably be there tomorrow. And so thanks for hanging out with us today, Wendy K. It's a Monday. We had a lot to attend to. So, you know, the dirt can wait. Stephanie Olson says, I know a baby and a little bit from Stephanie Olson. Has been a member for 11 months. Yeah, it's true. A full baby and then some. A full baby, and I don't know what 2 months will get you, but Stephanie, thanks for being a member for 11 months. Almost a full year. We're almost at our 1-year anniversary, Stephanie. Ooh. All right, so thanks for being here, Stephanie. This one from FMF Doc over on Local says, hey, watchers, what's up, FMF? Good to see you. Hey, Rob, good to see you, FMF. Hopefully you're doing well, brother. It's nice to see you. And another one from John McGarvey in the house. John, you're the man, bringing in 10 membos this time. 10 membos including Blue Sky, Starlet S, Anthony, Lexi's here, what's up? Eric L, Lil Lonis, Ecoms, Snoopy, Ryan D, and Michael K, all in the house, coming in courtesy of John McGarvey in the house. Thanks, John. Hey, who else we got? We got Pinecone13 just became a supporter. Amazing. YouTube members, don't forget, you can grab the Telegram link by navigating over to the community tab section, scrolling on down, and we'll see you over there. We got Raymond Loera says, what's the difference between a witness statement and a witness deposition? Trying to understand how and when the penalty of perjury comes into effect. Well, it's a great question, Raymond Loera, and it's not as cut and dry as you'd like it to be. All right, there's kind of a spectrum of conversations that happen, right? Like, you can think of a witness statement as a police statement, you know, as somebody calling and making a statement, as somebody writing a statement. It could mean a million things. And a deposition could also be like a recorded, transcribed interview that's not under oath, right? So like you could have a deposition that's not under oath, and you could have a formal deposition that is under oath. It depends on what you're doing it for and what the purpose is. So as always in the law, the question is, it depends. But a lot of it's negotiated out between the parties. So like here, we've talked about, for example, the Devon Archer were, you know, I guess you could probably call those, like I think Congress would call those recorded depositions or recorded interviews, but they're not under oath with like Devon Archer. But his lawyers were there, but I don't think he would have been sworn in under the penalty of perjury, right? So there's negotiations about all that. But good question. This one from NY says, can Chutkan rely on press reports or outside court filings to come to decisions? Yeah. If she admits to such, isn't that directly appealable? No. No, yeah. I mean, she can rely on whatever she wants. She's the judge. If it did not happen in court as evidence or as a filing, isn't it vulnerable to being overturned as biased? No, not really. I mean, yeah, the judge can take judicial notice of all sorts of stuff. She has already, you know, commented on out of court stuff. She can manage her courtroom. She's got a lot of leeway to do it. So I think that if she said something that was completely biased, like they tried to get her to recuse herself. You remember we covered the Chutkan recusal motions. They were saying that she made some other statements in other trials that implicated Trump, and she said that they didn't implicate Trump and that she didn't need to recuse herself. So she's allowed to make statements and rely on other things. But if it's biased, like if she says that, you know, I relied on Rachel Maddow's show in making my opinion, right? You would attack that claim. But the fact that it's something external alone is not enough, if I'm reading your question right. Magic Stick Seeker is here. What's up, Magic Stick says, woohoo! Been a member for 4 months. That's almost halfway to a baby, almost. And says, thanks, Rob, for bringing us the good stuff. Thank you, Magic Stick, for being here. We did have some good stuff today. It's going to be a lot more, I think. Glad that you're here. Thanks for being a membo. A Bad Poet is here. Says, Fani should just let the world know that Trump is a crook. Just show the votes and prove there was no election fraud for the world to see. Double dog dare ya. Yeah, they could just show all the records. Like, if this is true, why do they have classified documents in the January 6th case? Why are the cases also under seal? Why can't we just see everything that's happening? If it's so dangerous, if it's so obvious, they can be transparent. We'll just see for ourselves. But that is not what we see. From a Bad Poet's in the house. And we got this one from a Bad Poet. It says, question, Obama's FBI didn't brief him about Biden. Odd? Well, I don't know. I think Obama and the FBI probably didn't want to talk to Biden. NY says, they did not read that brief. They are proving Trump's point by pointing out impeachment as being the remedy during his term. I agree. It felt like they were proving his point many, many times over. Quarter Native. That's a new name. Welcome. Says Washington State Governor Inslee broke state law when he transported fruit across the state. He wasn't charged. Guess why? He was headed to visit a wildfire area, and it was in the course of his duties. Would that be a prior precedent set? Well, I mean, I think it's in line. So like, yeah, if you're doing something in the course of your duties, so I don't know that a prosecutor, like we all technically break the laws all the time. I think this would probably fall into a category of like prosecutorial discretion. Technically maybe you break a law, but is it a prosecutable crime? Probably not. So like Inslee, he would argue that, I mean, you'd have to find somebody to prosecute him. Like if he was Donald Trump and he did this, he might be prosecuted for it. But I guess the question is, if you're in the hula hoop, you're in the hula hoop. If it's within the course of your conduct, it's within the course of your conduct. And I would say that making sure an election is legitimate is one of the primary duties of the executive branch, right? They execute the laws, and the election is one of those things. So good to see you, Quarter Native, and welcome over on YouTube. Says, excuse me, in sleazeless, darn autocorrect. Governor in sleaze, I see, up there in Washington. Good to see you, Quarter Native. Thanks for joining us over on Locals. And we had this one from NY, says, it's a black hole. We have given money and had multiple special bills. It can wait, or even better, the Europeans can pay for it. Says, if they mention the DOJ practice as the DOJ opinion letter about presidential immunity in their brief, doesn't that open the door to what's on file at the time of Trump's alleged crime? Meaning they mention it. Doesn't the DOJ have to say, this is what our stance was since he was a member of the executive branch? That's from NY. Jonathan is here, says Secret Service is involuntarily assigned to former presidents. So can't Secret Service issue warrants and decide probable cause? Decide if this DC case has merit. So they're not prosecutors, so they wouldn't be able to charge crimes. I mean, I think if they would report a crime to a U.S. attorney, and then the attorney would prosecute it. So Secret Service agents would just be like police or other FBI agents. They don't have prosecuting authority, but they could file a report. This guy committed, fraud or tried to attack somebody or tried to breach something, and then a U.S. attorney would investigate the case and then actually bring the charges. Jesser Bob is here. Oh my goodness, we got a birthday in the house. Jesser Bob. Wow. Happy birthday to Reagan Harper Smith and the whole Reagan Harper Smith household, all the family over there. Reagan is going to be 8 years old tomorrow. 8 years old is a great age. Happy birthday to Reagan. That's a big happy birthday from the speech guy. Yep, we got to start him young. So my friends, our Watching the Watchers fam friends, let's all give a big, warm, happy birthday. Happy birthday to Reagan Harper Smith, turning 8 years old. It's a great age over at the Jesser Bob household and the Smith household. Starting him young. We got to start him young. It's important. So keep bringing those kids back to the speech guy so that we can get them voting right from the beginning. Jesser Bob, happy birthday to you guys. Hopefully you have a beautiful birthday over there. That's going to be a ton of fun. We got Linda's here. Hey, 2 months. What's up, Linda? Says, cheers, big ears, high five, XOX. Yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do about them. Maybe I'll have to talk to somebody about that. Hey, what's up, Knox Bierman? $100 coming in to Eric's house from Libra Law. Ooh, check that out. Okay, so Libra Law. And Knox Bierman's a lawyer. I believe she's in Texas. So thank you to Libra Law and Knox Bierman to Eric's house. It'll go over there and we'll match it. Says it was a bit late, but given with lots of love. Well, we know that, Knox, and we're grateful to you for being a part of our community and for donating over to Eric's house. We'll make sure it gets there, and I appreciate you. This one came in from GDL MAL. Says leaf blower guy is charging his eco health blower, ready to blow that dust all over the place. It'll all be gone. So we had this morning on our members only stream, we had a tile saw guy. Sometimes we have leaf blower guy who comes out here. Leaf blower guy's, nice. He's quick. He's easy. Comes in 15 minutes. He's gone. Tile saw guy, he's usually here for a long time. And tile saw guy usually is, starting at like 6:30, 7 in the morning. It's, loud like a tile saw. I mean, I know that tiles need to be sawed. I get it. You know, it is what it is. I just happen to, you know, I kind of have a soft spot for leaf blower guy, I guess. That's all I'm saying. Hey, this old guy says, hey, Rob, you were in rare form today. Great show. Thank you, this old guy. I was involved in the federal prosecution of a number of my business associates 10 years ago. Thankfully, as a witness rather than as a target of the Inquisition. I saw the abuses of the DOJ up close and personally. Luckily, the 2 defendants that I testified for were acquitted by the jury. The other 17 defendants all were guilty and got federal time ranging from 2 to 20 years. My advice is to remember to duck. Gosh. Well, thank you for participating in the jury process. Thank you for doing your civic duty. Thank you for listening to the facts and being there to testify. Hopefully justice was done, but I'm guessing that it was not. I saw the abuses of the DOJ up close and personally. Sounds accurate. Yeah, you're not alone on that. Thank you, this old guy. Thanks for being a membo. Thanks for the very nice dono, and thanks for the story. You're not alone. A lot of people have experienced it, and it's unfortunate. You know, we don't want that in our country. We've got Golden Gaming. What's up? 2/3 of a baby. Ooh. Says, thanks for all your great work, Rob. Thank you, Golden Gaming. And that's the Fallout guy. Shout out to Golden Gaming and the Fallout guy. And it sounds like it might have a nice channel over there. Talks about gaming, which I started Diablo because Elon started it. And I like to do things that Elon does, you know. I don't know, so, whatever. But it's, you know, it's an interesting game. Interesting game. Anyways, shout out to Golden Gaming. Maybe he's talking about Diablo over there. Now, speaking of Elon, let's go over to the X platform and see who is over there before we wrap it up and talk about our after party with our membos over at our after party location, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Before we get there, let's see who we have. Oh my gosh, we've got 16 people watching on the X, which means Elon might be in there. And who do we have here? Look at this, 16 people. Oh my goodness. We've got Danny McWilliams says, Rob, if I ever need a lawyer, you would be the only one I would trust. Saying that I've been watching your podcast for a long time, the longer I watch, the lower my opinion of other lawyers is. Well, I think that's a compliment, Danny McWilliams. The first part definitely is. And so thank you for that, man. That's a funny comment. And I do appreciate that. You know, I do my very best. I'm passionate about this stuff, man. Let's go. Hey, Fred says, okay, chat my idea. We get together with Rob and Johnny and set up a GoFundMe to raise $20 million, buy Mar-a-Lago, all move down to Palm Springs, build Rob a studio, and live life happily ever after. Man, that'd be a ton of fun. I'm in. Who's starting the dono page? All right, we just need 20 million. It's not it. First of all, Mar-a-Lago's cheap, and we'll like highball them. Okay, we know it's only worth like 18 million, according to Letitia, and she's so smart. And so we'll offer him 19. Then we'll have $1 million to spare. And we'll party. We'll just party with the extra $1 million left over. Sound good? All right, I'm in. Let's do it, Fred. All right, you're in charge. Feline says, so if Chutkan denies Trump's motion to dismiss, can he appeal? And if so, say the appellate court denies that as well. Can he appeal to the Supreme Court at that point? I would love to see the Supreme Court get its eyes on this case. So theoretically, well, yes. I mean, so yes, it's a complicated question. Theoretically, yes, he could appeal it. But it would require the judge to, I believe, here's the thing. It's a motion to dismiss. And so after Trump is convicted, could Trump file an appeal on the conviction, referencing the motion to dismiss and presidential immunity? And could the Court of Appeals remedy that? Okay, that's kind of the answer. That's kind of the question. If they could remedy that, then I think the answer is that no, he cannot appeal it. Or the answer is he can always appeal, but at this stage, it would require basically the judge to certify it and then send it up to the Court of Appeals. Because it's a motion to dismiss, and because there's really no other, outside consequences of it, I think the judge would not certify it for appeal. They would let this go until the end of the case. Trump would be convicted, then he could appeal it after the trial is over. Then at that point, all of this is true. then the appellate court, then he appeals to the Court of Appeals. And if they deny, then yes, he goes to the Supreme Court. But in criminal cases, in federal criminal cases, they don't want you to appeal in the middle of the case. What we see with the gag order and the appeal on the gag order is a little bit different, because that has collateral consequences outside of the case. Okay, if Trump is gagged, if Trump cannot speak, the Court of Appeals cannot fix that. It's over. Like, the Court of Appeals is just done. And Trump loses all the time that the gag was in place, right? And a motion to dismiss is not quite like that, because Trump could claim and still win on presidential immunity after the fact. But yes, I'm with you. I would love to get the Supreme Court on it. I think we'll be at the Supreme Court today. Not today, but at some point on this case and others. And I think the immunity issue is a great one. But I'm trying to think, could the immunity issue, I mean, honestly, like, I think you can make the same argument for the immunity case as he's making in the gag case. Like, the fact that this prosecution is going on is a collateral consequence to his political campaign. And so that would be my argument. Like, when Chutkan will dismiss this, I think that he will try to appeal it now anyways, and we'll see what happens then. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's a great question. And there's a lot of different ways it could go. Old Drill Sergeant says, I saw 144 viewers at one point. Oh my gosh. Elon was definitely here today. 57 today as well. And Eclectic Divergent is also over here. And hey, did you see this? Our friend Viva? Look at this. Our friend Viva sat down with Dinesh D'Souza over in Rumbles, in Locals headquarters, I believe, down there in Florida, man. And they had a great conversation.
Their rights in jeopardy. So, for example, if attorneys general in, let's say, Texas were to bring an indictment against Mayorkas for child trafficking, criminal indictment saying you are fully aware that cartels are bringing kids to the border, they're with adults and it's not their kid. And as soon as they come over into our side, these kids are basically put into a child trafficking, because we're...
All right, interesting. So go check that out from our friend Viva. And amazing comments over on the X platform. As a reminder, you can certainly go over to our community. We got Russ is over there. Some of these comments got flagged. So I'm just giving them a quick read. All right, and so we'll leave those there. Now, we also have a community over on X, and you can join us over there. Here's what the community looks like. Oh, we're almost at 500 members. Who's going to be the lucky 500? Come and join us. Watching the Watchers is on the X, and you can share comments. You can share stories here, and we're posting our short form content to this page. So come and check us out, watchingthewatchers.locals.com, or follow us over on the X at Rob Govea. Rob Govea ESQ is the address. But my friends, that is it for us on the day. We are going over to our members only after party here at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Friends on YouTube, you can join us on Telegram. Just navigate over to the community tab section on YouTube and download the app and get the link right there. We've also got our website, robertgovea.com. You can sign up for the daily newsletter to get all the segments delivered to your inbox in case you miss anything. Our website has all the reports. All the videos get turned into reports, and we're putting PDFs on there as well. So go and check those out, robertgovea.com. We also want to thank our mods and the meme smiths who mod down the fort for us and keep things nice and orderly, including John McGarvey in the house. Donut Mind Me's here. Thanks for clipping, both of you gentlemen. Dog Digger, Janek909, John Allen's in the house, Zach Nichols, Beyond Geo, Zulu, Ronnie Cole, our friend Playin' Hooky, Just Cause, K Bean, and of course, our friend Vientigas Prime. We also want to thank our meme smiths, Geegum Geegum, Sleepy Dog Lee, and Nathan N810 over on the Locals. But we are going to wrap it up right there. And before we do, I know there was another message or two. And here was this comment. Scottish Gal is in the house. Hey, here's what she says. She says, hey, Rob, I'm a realtor in Florida, which is very good to know. Let me know when you want to buy Mar-a-Lago. LOL. I mean, we need a place for all these babies you're having. That's true. And that's a pretty big place. That's a nice place to raise all these babies for sure. Yeah. Put them all in there and they'll all turn up and like what, little Trumpers? Oh gosh, sorry for all the kids, little Trumper kids. Hey, we got 500 membos over on the X. Who was 500? Who was 500? Let's see. Can we tell? Oh no, we're still at 499 on my list. Here, let's do a refresh. Somebody said we just crossed. It's there, 500 membos. So we did it, we crossed it. All right, good to see everybody. You can jump in on this, right? And you can follow other people and leave comments. It's a good way to kind of expand outside and mix it up out there. But that is it for us on the day. We are going to wrap it up right there. What's up? Welcome. Teresa J's coming in. Welcome aboard, Teresa J in the house. As a supporter, we'll see you on the members only after party as well. But that is it for us on the day. My friends, we are going to leave it right there. We will come back tomorrow to get into it all again. It's going to be a lot of stuff. Going to be more documents, more shenanigans that we'll attend to. And I hope that you join us so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.